All right. Bernadette, we are started, and I will check the attendees.
Thank you. I see one attendee. I think that's our minutes recorder.
That is not our minutes recorder, but I will give her access to the recording, so she should be able to record minutes.
Okay. Does anybody have any concern with us starting before we have our usual minutes recorder here, or are we okay to go?
Oh, she's here.
There she is. All right. See, stall tactics. I always like those. Okay. Any questions about the agenda materials review that we're looking at for today? I see heads shaking no, so we will say that, okay, we're good to go with that. Let's look at the minutes from October meeting. Any questions, comments, changes, additions, deletions, corrections? This is when I miss Steve. Steve always had something to say. They spelled my name wrong. Okay, anybody want to make a motion?
I'll move to approval.
I can second that.
Perfect. Unless I hear an objection, I'm just going to approve those by assent. That's the right term, right? We can do that, Leah?
Acclamation, but yes.
Acclamation, acquisition, something like that. Starts with an A. Got pretty close. All right, let's go to comments from board members. I guess this is where I'll start making up a list of order. Since I see Bill in my first window, I'm going to go Bill first, and then we'll go to Alan, Clay, Jose, and we'll have Michael if he shows up. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay. I don't really have much to say, just welcome everybody, good to see everybody. And I would really like this to be in person at some point in the future, hopefully.
Hey, that would be a nice thing. I just have one comment. I'm still figuring this out, and I don't know, where things fit and what's appropriate. The minutes that we just approved say in the discussion of a traffic stop for a pedestrian violation of the vehicle code that we examined. I don't think it was a case review, but we looked at it. The minutes say, like Lyman said, officers should know they have discretion. And the one thing that in debriefing with myself from that discussion we had was that we learned from the officer that was with us that evening that when a citizen raises the issue of a profile stop or improper stop, the supervisor has to be called. And to me, I realized, like, the bigger point I was making is that prolonged that particular stop. It increased the chances, in my view, that a citation would be written, when my point was that the immediate raising of profiling, you're making a stop based, an improper stop, creates this dynamic where even for a pedestrian, non-moving traffic violation, those people had to stay and wait and have that encounter with that supervisor. And that was the bigger point. And I did read the minutes was also, that's it. So thank you. And if it's not, I'm trying to figure out what is appropriate and not, and I'm trying to make my way. So thank you.
All right, Clay, and then Jose.
Yeah, I don't have additional comments, just to say hello and welcome to everybody who's watching.
Glad to be back. Sorry to have missed last month, but looking forward to speaking with you all again.
Okay, I don't have a lot. It's not on the agenda, but I guess at some point I'm just kind of curious. When I was on the board years ago, when we would get to maybe towards the end, we would talk about the closed cases that are always attached to the minutes. And we kind of haven't done that recently. So I'm not sure how much others on the board have looked at closed cases. And so Alan and Clay, this might be kind of more information for you, but in the past, we've looked at the closed cases individually, And then if there's something on there that we think would be worth reviewing, then we bring that to the meeting during either our opening comments, but more often during our closing comments, just to say, I saw this case on there. Leah, do you think this would be something that would be good for us to review? The reason I'm bringing this up is because looking at the closed cases, I'm not seeing anything that's really jumping out at me that is kind of discussionable. I know that's not a word, but I'm just going to use it anyway, because last month we had a couple cases, that we talked about, but I think they were kind of certainly unusual from what we usually talk about. So I don't think the cases we've had have really given Alan and Clay, either one of you, a chance to really see what we do. This month is kind of a similar situation. We're looking at something that doesn't really give us a lot to kind of dissect and discuss. I mean, being the people that we are, we always have things to say, but that's not necessarily very informative for the parties, the public, to know kind of how police are doing their jobs, and the police to know how the public wants them to do their jobs, which is how I view what our positions on this board is. So unless somebody's going to say, oh, there's some closed cases that I really think we should review next month, I'd kind of like all of us to maybe be thinking about, we take December and January off, because we historically have taken one or the other off. And we kind of already had talked about taking January off. And so just not seeing anything to get us ready for December, I just kind of wonder if it's worth, everybody's time and energy during this time of year that gets pretty hectic. Obviously, if there's something in there that somebody wants to talk about, I think absolutely we can do that. We would still certainly be within the rights of the board to take off another meeting. We only have to meet 4 times a year. Historically, we meet 10, sometimes 11. So I'm just putting it out there now in opening statements, comments, because I think it's one of those things that I don't want it to throw it in at the last minute and have people go, where's that coming from? But if there's something that's in the closing in the closed cases that you think would be beneficial for us to discuss, just have that in mind. Otherwise, I think I don't have anything else to talk about. So we don't have Michael here, who would give us committee report from the Police Commission, and Jose, your HRC. So do we have anything from the HRC?
I have sent an email and have not heard anything back yet, so I will continue to do so.
And I think Leah usually has something to say about the Police Commission. Maybe she knows something about HRC as well.
So I did not go to Police Commission last month. I was on a vacation, so I don't have any updates on that. But I got an email from the HRC that they have appointed a new liaison to this group. So it's going to be Amanda McCluskey. She emailed me today and she's not able to make it tonight. She does have backup, Daniel Borson, but I don't know that they coordinated for tonight. So we do now have a liaison again from that group to us. And we have our liaison to them. So hopefully we'll get that communication going again.
Okay. So I guess, are we ahead of schedule? Are we too early to go to public comment? Look at my clock. Leah, do you want to go ahead and open it up for public comment?
Sure. So if anyone in the attendees list would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand through the Zoom. If you are having trouble or unsure how to raise your hand, please feel free to email your comments in and I will get them entered into the public record and get them to the members of the board. There's not an easy way to communicate without that little raised hand thing, but if anyone would like to raise their hand, I would give you permission to speak at this time. I am not seeing anyone raising their hands, so I think we can close public comment.
Okay, thank you for taking care of that. All right, so I saw Officer Tinseth show up, and I believe he's the person that's going to be doing our training topic tonight.
Lieutenant.
Oop,
Yeah.
bad me. Sorry about that. So Lieutenant Tinseth, if you could just kind of tell us a little bit about who you are, how long you've been with the EPD, and then tell us what you want to talk about, our training topic, that would be great.
Sure. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, awesome. My name is Ron Tinseth. I'm a lieutenant working in finance and admin right now as my current assignment. I've been with EPD, it will be 25 years in February, so it's been a bit. I've been a lieutenant since 2016 and a sergeant since 2011. We're going to be talking about the STOPS data collection program, which is a program based on interpretation or an officer's perception of a person during a person or traffic stop. And I'm going to share my screen and show you a brief PowerPoint here. I just wanted to talk briefly about kind of where we came from on this. And in 2013, the chief of police assigned staff to start looking at a way to collect demographics and racial profiling type data. It was assigned to Sam Kamkar at the time. And we went through a lot of public comment, work sessions about what to collect, how to interpret it, etc. In 2016, January 2016, I took over the program. And in 2017, we had House Bill 2355, which made it mandatory that police agencies across Oregon start reporting out on STOPS type data. Our program, I guess you're not seeing my screen. Give me just a second here. There we go. That should be better. Okay. It's better for me too, because I can see you guys. Anyway, we started taking a look at some technology challenges, some software challenges, etc. And I developed some program goals to make it easy to implement and minimally intrusive. One of our goals, which were unique in the state, is we require 100% participation. Not all agencies in Oregon are requiring that of their officers. They kind of just take it for granted that most of their officers do, and they get a representative sampling over time. We actually have a mechanism in place to assure 100% participation, and I get a report every day about that. And then we work to make sure we accurately give the required data to the state. It happens on a monthly basis. We actually started in July of 2018 is when we were required to start collecting. We did a soft rollout at the end of 2017. And then we started collecting live data in January of 2018, which was well ahead of schedule, and had kind of built the technology infrastructure to get us off the ground. And before that, we also had an opportunity to I sat on several steering committees at the state level about how we're going to collect this, working with some vendors, working on some philosophical issues about what we collect, why we collect it, and how we use it. So that was a great way for us here at Eugene to have a voice at the state level, and I'm proud that we're able to do that. What we do collect is all traffic stops, all person stops, and when an officer calls out on that, they have a what's called a stop module automatically created for them on their computer in their car. And when the officer has the stop finished, they go back, quickly fill out the required fields, and then hit a button to submit it. And then on the back end, we run a report every day that has the numbers of qualifying stops versus the number of stops that are actually in our system. And if there are any discrepancies, today's report had about 4 or 5 people that hadn't done them yet, but they were like from the same day or the day before. So essentially we're getting 100% participation and have been since day one. So that's been very successful for us. This is what the officer sees in the car. A lot of this information is automatically filled in for them. So they'll only put in like the initial reason of the stop, which is that kind of the bluish turquoise color. And that's actually the statutory reason for the stop. So it'd be like 811, 111 for violation of posted speed limit, the age of the driver, race, etc. And this is all from the perception of the officer. That's the test, is from the perception of the officer, and then they do a bunch of statistics, run it through some different analytics, and we'll talk about that here a little bit later. This is essentially what it looks like. Was a stop done? Was an arrest made? All of these different things are kind of in drop downs, and the officer selects the appropriate fields. And again, this is the last of the things that an officer would fill out here, and then they'd hit submit. We have a couple of technology and infrastructure challenges. We deploy people on foot and bike who don't have tablets like a car. So they have to go back to the office, and our traffic team now has tablets, but we'll sometimes go back to the office and log onto the computer and do the reports back at the office. So it's a little more time for them. They have to remember or write down a few things that, their perception at the time of the stop. I'd mentioned the audit review, which is the thing that runs daily. At this point, we've been doing it since, January of 2018. And so much of our patrol force is quite frankly hired since then. A good chunk of them, it's all they've ever known. And this is just part of regular policing at this point. We did a good job of managing organizational change and how we implemented. And I think we did a good job getting it implemented. From time to time, we'll get errors if the dispatcher puts them on a stop that really isn't a stop. There's a way for an officer to fill out a field and then submit a ticket that's known to be an error for a variety of reasons, and that data is excluded and not reported to the state. It's not canceled, it's just not reported because there was an error. This is an older email, but one of the things that, or an older example of the audit that we do. And it basically, after 30 days if an officer doesn't complete, or after 2 weeks, an officer doesn't complete their stop, their supervisor is notified. And then a time after that, their lieutenant gets a notification. If they still don't resolve it, the captain gets a notification. And early on in this, our patrol captain said, "I better not ever see one of these." So he was supportive, and we rarely see them go much beyond the initial supervisor. They get with the officer and figure out what the problem is, and make sure they get reported. This is just this is again an older one. I can show you guys today's if you want to take a look, but this is, I blurred out the names, but it's about like this most days. This is the 2021 from a couple of weeks ago, and there's just a handful of them on there, and they're not very old, and they never actually go away off the report either until they do the right stop module and it marries up. The program's working great for us. We're getting 100% participation, like I said. Some things changed at the state level between 2013 and 2018 about who does the reporting, what that mechanism looks like, the way that things are collected, and the analysis that they go through. But you know, we're getting the information to the CJC, which is the agency that we report to, and then we've had 2 annual reports at this point. We've had 2019, 2020, and then in December of 2021, they'll have the current year's report ready for us. The CJC, the Criminal Justice Commission, runs 3 different statistical reports, and in the veil of darkness, which basically says, is there a discrepancy between daylight and darkness, meaning that an officer could perceive the race or the ethnicity or the sex of a driver during daylight but not nighttime? And is there a difference between daytime and nighttime, and if so, what is it? We were good there in 2019 and in 2020. There wasn't much in either report that was of concern. Portland and Beaverton had a few areas of concern in the hit rate, which I'll talk about here in a minute. The predicted disposition is basically you write a ticket, you make an arrest, etc. And the way they do that is they have a statistical way that they can know what to expect, and it's called within control limits. So if something is outside of the control limits, then you pay attention to it. If it's inside the control limits, it's within what's expected, and you go on to something else. We had our 2020 report had an issue with the Hispanic or Latinx population, that they had a higher rate of citations. And this is a pretty small number for us out of thousands of records that are created. There was in the hundreds of these records. And what we looked into it a little bit, and we also added some fields in communication and with CJC to try and kind of dive into that data and see if there's something that we can tell that's driving that. And what we were able to say is that most of the citations that were issued are less discretionary. So for instance, most police officers are going to write suspended drivers. Most police officers are going to write uninsured drivers. Most police officers are going to write people that are over 20 miles over the speed limit a ticket, etc. So that was the assumption, is that we wrote more suspended and uninsured drivers, and that is what kicked us into that out of control limits. And we were just barely out anyway. But this next year, we'll have more data and for the CJC to analyze to help us understand, you know, what's driving that and whether it's truly discretionary or less discretionary. For instance, Oregon State Police requires a physical arrest for all DUIs. They have to, it's policy. So it's no longer discretionary. Ours are still discretionary, but I would argue that almost all police officers are going to write suspended and uninsured drivers. The KPT hit rate is how many times for each ethnicity you're searching and finding something. So that might be if there's 100 white people, 100 black people, 100 Asian, et cetera, et cetera. Of those, how many are searched, how many are you finding? And there shouldn't be a discrepancy in hit rates based on ethnicity or what could be tied to ethnicity. And we're good there. So like I said, next month we have the 2021, or I guess it'd be fiscal year 22, or no, it'd be fiscal year 21 report coming out, and we're eager to see how we do on that and whether those additional data fields are going to be telling us anything on the Latinx community. But that's the only thing that we're really keeping an eye on at this point. And with that, is there any questions?
I'm gonna ask a quick question. So tinted windows obviously would make it a bit more challenging before the stop to determine somebody's ethnicity. And since the idea of this data is the reason for stopping somebody, whether or not the perception is part of the reason for the stop, is there any notation on when you're making a traffic stop that the windows were tinted? I mean, other than, I guess, if they give a citation for tinted windows, but.
Yeah, no, there's not a place for us to look at that. And I would say that, yeah, no, we don't track that.
Okay. Alan, I see your hand is up, and then Clay.
Thank you. Lieutenant, my question / concern on that issue, driving while suspended is the one offense that an officer doesn't need to observe a violation, that they can sit in the light and run the license plate and find that the vehicle suspended. So I see the possibility for a correlation between, in this case, more Latinx license plates being run without observing any noticeable, traffic infractions. So just a kind of question, when you consider that issue, are you considering that aspect of that particular offense? Thank you.
No, it's solely based on the perception of the officer, whether they run the license plate ahead of time or, I know what you're talking about. Is there a possibility that an officer could run a style or a vehicle based on what they perceive the driver to look like? I wouldn't say it's possible. I haven't observed that in my time with EPD, and the numbers are so small that that even small number of changes have a lot of influence in there.
Thank you. Just briefly, is there any, are the individual stop modules, like is an officer ever scrutinized for their stop modules to detect the pattern of you make so many stops in such percentage or this race or that, is that an aspect of analysis?
We can, statutorily, the data is anonymized. So the identifier of the officer isn't reported to the state. That is a tool that we can use internally, and I'm not aware that that we've had any issue with that at all. And that could be a training issue, or it could be a variety of things. But again, we're not necessarily out of our control limits, except for in that one category, and that's only barely. So if we had a significant systemic problem, we would see EPD out of control limits, and then that would require a lot more data analysis internally.
Thank you.
Clay and then Bill.
Hi, Lieutenant Tenseth. Thanks for the presentation. I'm wondering if when this rolled out or since then, if there have been conversations about recording perceived race prior to going through with the rest of the stop, only because I wonder about just the process of having an interaction and then thinking back to, a perceived race prior to stopping someone, and that being colored by your experience with the interaction, or, not remembering. And I don't know if that's a possibility with that software, that you can enter some data in when you initiate the stop and then more data in after the stop is completed. But I wondered if there was a conversation about that and if there were ever any concerns about that.
Yeah, that was at the state level that we had those conversations. And again, the House Bill 2355 sets a variety of metrics that they wanted to collect. And then we had further discussions at the steering committees with a wide variety of panelists and various interests, et cetera. And yeah, that was talked about.
Okay. That'd be interesting to learn more about, from just what the reasoning was that data can be collected and after the fact, sort of. Sorry, I do have one additional question, if that's all right. For those, and I just may have missed this in your description, for the not mandatory citations, but the types of stops that usually almost always lead to citation, are those, is the data looked at in a way where there's percentages of those stops for all races or all categories of people? I guess I'm trying to understand, you may have 10 white people stopped for that and 10 citations issued, and 10 Black people stopped for that same offense and 10 citations issued. And is that a percentage that is reported in the reporting that you're doing?
Well, because I pulled this this first field up, and one of the questions relates to your point before that about did you know the driver's race prior to the stop, which is in the middle. It's kind of if you see the number of passengers right below that, that's a wire, yes or a no. And so the officer fills that out when they fill out their stop module. That fits into the state statistical reporting and their testing. As for the number of certain offenses broken down by demographics, yes, that is reported to the state. And the statutory reason for the stop, we actually fill in the ORS now. When it first rolled it out, we were looking at a data field of around 3,000 offenses, which seemed overwhelming. And so we've grouped them into either person or traffic stops, and then further, whether it was a violation or a crime type thing. And we've this last year changed that to the actual ORS. So now we know if it's driving while suspended and the race of the person, that by perception of the officer, race and sex of the person, and the state does look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Bill?
Well, thank you, Lieutenant, for coming in this presentation. I want to comment first on, I hope everybody heard you say that, EPD was ahead of the game on this, that they actually started down this data collection before it was required by the state, and we're actually one of the lead agencies. And I think that's an important piece for all of us to understand that, EPD was always looking at these things even before the state or other people wanted to. My question is that, and it's been a while since I looked at any of these reports that they do. Are they doing reports by and showing like what the whole state is, Lieutenant? Like, the percentage of stops that are by race or by that compared to, do they report that statewide, or is it just individual agencies?
Yeah, it's been almost a year since I read the last one, so I'm kind of with you on the same thing. I think they do have a statewide synopsis, and then they break out by each different agency and performance of each agency. Like I said, Portland had an issue the last couple of years. The first one, they got grilled. The second one, they didn't do so well at. Beaverton had an issue with, I think it was, I can't remember exactly what it was, but 2019, they had an issue. Medford had something about higher pedestrian stops. It was a little bit out of one of the limits also. One of the things that the CJC, one of their goals is, if an agency is out of the control limits, why is that? And is there an issue? Do we need to further look into this? Do we need some more training at a DPST? Kind of drill down into that to understand the why behind, the outcome of the statistical reporting. So they've been very, very good to work with, very supportive. We've gone to their office many times, and they've come to ours many times. And and now they have all the police agencies in Oregon that are reporting to them. So, anytime there's been something that we need to dig into, they've been super supportive on it and want to understand as much as we do.
This program's come a long way. I like to see that, from the initial 6 things I think we collected as information per stop to getting all of this information. It's good to see. I think it's going to help us better police work in the future. Thanks for all your work on it.
Yeah, you're welcome. And of course, it's important for us to report to the citizens that we're serving here to help build trust in our community. And this is one of the ways that that was one of the goals, and the reasons for moving to this is to report out on how we're doing as a police agency and how we're serving the citizens here.
Okay.
Bernadette,
I know.
Oop.
Oh, I have a couple of follow-ups if I can. So in the part where you're talking about the initial purpose for the stop, so driving while uninsured or driving while suspended, those might be the citations that are given all the time, but they wouldn't be a reason for a stop. So is there a place that if the initial observation was running a red light, but then they're only cited for the driving uninsured or the driving while suspended, is that noted on here? And is the initial purpose the traffic violation and then someplace else is driving uninsured, driving while suspended, or is it only what they're cited for there?
Yeah, the initial purpose for the stop might be something like running a red light or 811-265 or something else. The result of the stop could be a citation or something else. One of the other things that we struggled with differentiating is warrant arrests, because those aren't discretionary. And so if you list an arrest, then what's really driving that is an arrest warrant. It's not a PC. So we wanted to, in the steering committee, we wanted to make sure that we were clear about the difference between those, because it's discretionary, non-discretionary. Yeah, there's in the result of the stop here, can be citation, or it can be a variety of other things. And I think we can now list the, well, I won't say that because I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
We recently changed a few of the things, and I thought we could do secondary stop or secondary reasons, or what the citation was for. But
So I mean, so you wouldn't see an initial purpose for the stop driving while suspended, right? Or driving uninsured. I mean, even though that might be the citation, because you can't stop them for that.
No,
Am I understanding that or no?
I don't, are you still a judge, Alan?
in the city of Veneta, Lieutenant, yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, you can, and that was his point earlier, is if you have reason to believe that the person driving the vehicle is suspended or wanted or something of that nature, you can stop and inquire for that.
Okay. Then, because everything has an app these days, I'm curious, do we know if this module has an app so it could be done? Because I think, or maybe not, officers are either have a department issued phone or they get some kind of stipend to use their phone, I would guess, since so many agencies do that. Is there an app for this that it could be downloaded onto a phone? So the pedestrian officers could do it pretty quickly, or not really an option at this point?
The state has that option. The problem with that is it reports directly to the state and it bypasses our audit system. So in order to make sure that we get 100% compliance, I had asked early on about the ability for this to live on a cell phone, and aside from Central Square, who's our service provider on this, wanting $1 bazillion, it could probably be done, but it would just take a ton of money. And this works well enough for us. I mean,
sure. Yeah. And we don't have that many officers that are on foot without a device to do this.
That's correct.
Right. Okay, Jose and Michael, you guys have been awfully quiet. Any questions before we let him go from either one of you? And welcome, Michael. Glad to see you.
Yeah, well, you just addressed my lack of questions. I caught the end of the presentation. I've enjoyed the other questions. Some what I might have asked, other people asked. So thank you.
Okay.
And excuse me if you've already addressed this. My question, at the end of the day, my brain's held together with duct tape and cardboard. So thank you. Your data can be cross-referenced, or can your data be cross-referenced, say, by stop, reason for stop, and ethnicity?
Yeah, and the state takes a very deep dive into this data and looks at it from a bunch of different angles. The reason that we don't spend a lot of time in our data is because they have the PhD researchers that they employ to do this work, and it's not, we don't have a research team here at EPD. We have ways that we can certainly do reports, but that's what we rely on the state for.
Great. Do you have any results yet as to, say, what kind of stops the do you have any results yet on the category that you said is out of I want to use the correct language, out of the control
limits?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll actually see that in in December. The state usually gives us a couple days ahead of notice before they're going to post, and it usually comes in December to take a look at it. So we'll know then. But I'm thinking that with the extra data fields that we added to understand the why, I think we'll be in a better position to answer that question just because we're able to work with CJC on it.
Thank you. I also look forward to seeing that if I have the right to see it. Last question for you. Does Eugene Police like articulate with any federal agencies like Immigration Customs Enforcement?
No.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Leah was trying to interrupt me at one point. Maybe she has a question. So Leah, do you have a question?
I would never interrupt you. I don't know what you're talking about. No, I realized my timing, I don't know if my timing was off or it was great that the report's coming out next month. So we'll have to have Ron come back and talk about what that shows. And yes, the state does a whole report. So Jose, you can definitely have eyes on it. My question, sorry, rambling route to get there, is for Lieutenant Tinseth, do you know if there's been a shift in any of this from the 2021 legislative session? Is there anything sort of coming that got changed, or I actually have no idea. So I don't know if there is.
Yeah, not that I've heard of. I know there's a bunch of work on police reform and things of that nature. I have not heard anything from any of my contacts at the state level about any changes to this report or this program.
Okay, thank you. That's all, Bernadette.
Lieutenant Tinseth, thank you for coming. I know that statistics are always something that are useful for us to see, and or questions certainly come up about it. So it's good to know that there is this wealth of knowledge out there that we just need to tap into and investigate, even though only a couple of us, not me, have PhDs that would be research qualified to look at it. So Michael, I'm looking at you on that one. So Michael will look at the report as it comes out, and he'll give us a full administrative review and executive summary, I'm sure, at some point in time.
I do words rather than numbers.
Oh, okay. All right. So
Thank you, Lieutenant. Thank you.
all right, so now we are on to the discussion of the recording of CRB meetings. Leah, do you have something to present or talk about before we talk about it?
I added this to the agenda because there was a motion last month to put this on the agenda. So that is sort of my just kidding. That's not my real introduction. I can see your face, Bernadette. I'll do something better. So just a quick historical context. When we used to meet in person, there have been different sort of iterations of how these meetings have been tracked. We had a discussion several years ago about whether or not to record the meetings and elected to stick with a minutes recorder. With Zoom and virtual meetings, everything has obviously changed. And there was a public comment from Majeska last month about whether we're going to continue recording after we're back in person. So this is your time to discuss your feelings around whether we want to continue recording when we're back in person. Is that a little?
Okay, well, Carolyn was the one that made the motion. She's not here. I think from past discussions, she's been pretty supportive of wanting to have things recorded. I can give a little perspective of in the before times. We had recordings and it was when we had a lot of board members, when we were getting away from using names and gender. Well, we've always had no names, but we were getting away from gender descriptors. And so I think everyone that's been on the board or who's on the board at this point in time, it's the norm not to use names and not to use gender. So I think the concern that previous boards had with audio recording, whether we go back and redact, I think that one concern has certainly, I think for the most part, gone away. There's always obviously exceptions to that rule. I think the other concern was at one point that we would not get our written minutes if we move to the recorded minutes. The upside of the written minutes, obviously, we all get to look at them and see if it's, how accurate it is. If we want to clarify, as Alan did earlier this evening, because when we did do recorded minutes for a while, it was a one-page summary our minutes was like a one-page typed summary that basically was what was the item, what was the motion, what was the outcome of the motion. So certainly the minutes that we get now, I don't know whether or not we have a position from the auditor's office as to whether we would still get those if we switch to just recorded minutes.
I don't see that needs to be either or. I will do whatever the group wants, but I don't think that it needs to be either or.
Okay. And I'll just go down the list. Bill, anything you want to say about it?
Well, I always have trouble when we're talking about our feelings on anything. So or robotic or dead live, but actually, it doesn't really matter to me. I understand the benefits of having it recorded. I do understand the history of why, I think we're all really good about not using names and not using genders. And I think that's the important thing, is that we really have to make sure we continue with that part of it. So that's all I have to say.
I would say I like the idea of the minutes recorder and the minutes that I've had an opportunity to review in the last few meetings. Like, that is a format that I appreciate, and that I wouldn't appreciate having to review a whole meeting, watch a whole meeting again, obviously. And my big pitch would be for audio and no more video. That's my only that's my pitch.
Yeah, I'm supportive of recording with all the concerns that were aired before. If those are met, if those are, dealt with, that's totally fine with me. And I actually think it creates an accessibility option for people who want to participate in a specific way. So if there are no technical issues with that, I think it's a good thing to do.
Jose.
I think both are possible in the 21st century, in that if we have the right equipment, there are plenty of like city council meetings and other groups that do like a YouTube live or something, as well as the stone tablet kind of stuff.
I really like the written. I think if we only got one, I would go with the written. Audio is my next one. I go back and forth about having us video after we're off of Zoom. I'm always concerned with any kind of camera situation that it sometimes changes how people actually interact and discuss things. I know that when we did some recordings in the past, it certainly was, it changes the dynamic of the conversation. But when it's just an unobtrusive tape recorder there, you kind of don't notice it so much. But when it was a camera there, you're just always kind of, or some of us, we're just, sometimes it's not as free flowing of the conversation. So but I think that having the recordings is important. So, Michael.
Yeah, I think that as a board member, it's nice to have the written, because that's something I can actually review before the next meeting. Whereas, or at a retreat or some other occasion when we need to review them, but I'm not going to rewatch the YouTube videos. So I think that it's like Bernadette was saying. I think that the written is indispensable for our own internal functioning. As far as recording goes, I don't know if I have a preference. I think that it is nice for accessibility reasons to have at least one. I was just noticing when accessibility got brought up that the transcription isn't enabled for the meeting. I know that's something the host has to do before they start it, is enable transcription. I just learned that last month. So that might be another thing to do, although these get posted on YouTube, right, where people can generate captions there if they want. Yeah, so I think either, I suppose it might, do we have a sense of what cost, if any, there is in this? Is there like any kind of data storage cost of all the video or anything?
Very good question. I'm not sure. We've obviously, basically, the governor requires us to record the Zoom meetings, and it's quite easy to do. So we've been doing it, and I have not seen any bills for storage. So we got that going for us. But first of all, thank you, Michael. I will look into that, enabling the closed captioning. That is, I've seen that on other ones, and I honestly never even thought about it. So thank you. I can look into costs. I think realistically, you know, we're not likely to be back in person. I mean, it sounds like you may be taking, if we're planning on taking January off, I highly doubt we're going to be in person next month, even if we do have a meeting. I was perhaps for February, that would be great. So I can look into potential costs of video and audio recordings. I will say, just a quick technological note, we have not really figured out a seamless way to edit when there is a public records breach in these meetings, even on these recordings. We're working on it, but it is not perfect yet. It is remarkably more expensive than I would have thought to get video editing software. So everyone who's listening, your auditor does not have video editing software. We don't do that. We don't know how. So that's a little bit rambling, but I can look into costs, but what I'm hearing is definitely keep the minutes recorder. And then as we potentially return to in person, everyone's interested in recording. So I'll come to you and let you know how we can support that, whether video or audio. Does that sound good?
I think so. Looking back at the minutes, there wasn't really a motion here except to have the conversation about it. So I think that we don't really need to, unless somebody wants to make a motion, I don't really see anything that we need to vote on or move forward on. I think this was more just kind of an opportunity to let you know where we all stand. And when we get to the point where we're back in person, I think then we can, if need be, we can have a motion and a vote at that point, unless somebody has a difference of opinion on that.
I mean, I think also just it seems very likely that we'll be trying to figure out a way to have hybrid options at meetings as well when we do return to in person, which would mean we could record it just like this. So yeah, thank you, Bernadette. I appreciate you clarifying that, but it's good to know where everybody is on this position or on this issue.
Okay. Michael, you came in a little late, so I just wanted to let you know what we were referring to about maybe taking December off is there haven't been a lot of cases that have raised a lot of interest recently. And so we attach the closed cases to the auditor attaches the closed case files synopsis to our reports. And so if there's ever a case that you want to review, you can bring it up at the meeting. And that kind of helps Leah and Carolyn and I make a decision as to what cases to review the next month. And so we've kind of been having a tough time because we haven't heard from the board any cases that look like something they want to review. And we haven't seen anything that like really look like it would garner discussion. So I just said at closing comments tonight, we can have a discussion about whether we go ahead and meet in December. Anyway, if there's a case that somebody's looking at, or if we want to just cancel December and January's, and then we would meet up in February, perhaps in person or at least online.
Sounds good.
Okay, Leah, go ahead.
I just want to let everybody know that I'll address the whole case flow issue during the auditor's report too. So
perfect. All right, so it looks like this would be the point for a break. It is 6:30, so why don't we take a quick 5-10 minute break? 5-minute break, Leah says. So why don't we take a quick 5-7 minute break, and we'll come back and then we will have the case review.
All right, we are back on.
Sorry, we're back. Okay, so it looks like we have a case review.
Yeah,
About 45 minutes for that. So Leah, if you would like to get us going.
Yes, I will do my best. Bear with me for a moment. All right, here's your case summary for tonight. There's only one case tonight, sorry. So several EPD officers were dispatched to a house fire to assist the firefighters for Eugene Springfield Fire. Officer A and Officer C were paired up as a training officer and a recruit. They arrived and firefighters were stringing the hose in the front yard. Officer C asked, there were people outside, asked people outside if there were other people inside. Someone stated that they thought there might be 2 people and a dog in the bedroom, in a bedroom upstairs. I think they said it was the one where the smoke was coming from. And so Officer A and C approached the front door. Officer A sort of beckoned Officer B to join them. They chatted for a second, and then Officer B and Officer C went inside the house upstairs trying to find more people. Officer A sort of got separated from Officer C at that point. Officer E's body worn camera was not activated at that time. So yeah, we'll come to that. We'll come back to that. Officer C found a locked door upstairs. Officer A sort of said that they could break it in. Officers, sorry, you guys are covering up my C's and B's and A's. So give me just, there we go. Officer C forced the door, and you can see in the video, there's black smoke in one like flame area, but the room is just completely filled with smoke. Supervisor D was sort of downstairs at the bottom of the stairs, shouted at the officers to get out so fire could get in. All the EPD officers left. Officer C checked in with a firefighter who looked like they were preparing to go in and said, you know, there's a room upstairs. This is where the smoke and fire was. Officers then backed away from the house and talked about sort of what their knowledge of fire behavior, I guess, is the best way to characterize that conversation. The complaint was internally reported. Supervisor was reviewing it and entered a blue team, indicating concern that Officer A didn't demonstrate proper judgment and potentially compromise the safety of Officer C, the recruit, as well as potentially interfered with Eugene Springfield Fire's response. And then this investigation was complicated by the fact that Officer A had 3 separate recordings, none of which were super pertinent. And so there was a question, well, we'll get to the allegation of not following the body worn camera video policy. So the allegations were that Officer A did not exercise good judgment at the scene of the fire, that Officer A did not perform the tasks associated with their official position when they failed to adequately supervise the recruit, that they did not follow the that they did not follow the body worn video policy, and then also for Officer B, that Officer B also did not show good judgment at the scene of the fire. Officer C, as a recruit officer, didn't get dinged with allegations because it seemed like they were pretty much doing what they were told. Ultimately, I'm sure we will discuss the fact that I did not write a memo. I concurred with the chain of command. Again, it was a workload issue. You may hear that a few times this year, but ultimately the investigation indicated that their actions were within policy. And then, like I said, here are your issues. And then I was gonna, maybe I should switch the order of these. But just, these are the materials that were provided for your review. I like detailing this so the public can see what all you guys have access to. So yeah, I will go ahead and shut off my screen so you guys can see each other and stop talking so you can talk to each other.
Okay, I wasn't very good about going in different order, rotating that. So, so we start with the complaint intake and classification. Just kind of overall comments about the case. And we'll start with Alan this time.
Okay, well, this is the one that still kind of perplexes me the most, but I am again on only because of the limited time that I've, been on the board, but the case selection is a little puzzling. Maybe it's what Bernadette says about that it's not, that there aren't police citizen complaints, but once again, I find, the intake, it's a case that essentially shows that a second out of 4 that I've had the chance to see, like that the police go after their own, and sometimes successfully or sometimes not. The substance of the case, it's interesting, and I look forward to the next round to comment. But and it's not by way of criticism; it's just by way of it just seems if there's a purpose. It's not to affirm that the police are heroic or that the fire is not good. We've been. It's the second time in a short period, fire and police, so that's my comment. Thank you.
All right, then Clay and then Jose.
Yeah, I think, well, I pretty much agree with Alan's comments. I will also say in terms of the intake and classification, is that what the term is that we're supposed to be? Yeah. When I first read the overview of the incident, I had the same concerns and thought about the same categories for classification. So I think that is appropriate. And we can talk more about the rest of it going forward.
Jose and then myself.
Yeah, I don't have any concerns with the classification.
I think, again, yeah, part of this is there aren't a lot of cases as to why we brought this one forward. I think one thing that we talk about blue team, or the officers will talk about blue team, and I'm not sure that that's really ever, for some members, kind of been discussed. So the blue team is a newer system, similar to the data system that we were just talking about. Blue team came about in my last go round, 2017, was it, Leah? It was after you started, right?
I think it was 13. Jason is here.
Oh, Jason may remember what blue team
Not
was.
weighing in, but
So,
Jason's
so
here.
so Jason might be able to give us, or be able to kind of tell you a little bit more. I mean, I can give my perception of, or Cindy can tell us, because my perception of what blue team is may not be the best way to explain it to the board, what blue team is and why it's so valuable to us. Cindy.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, Blue Team 2013. Leah is right on. And you want just a little overview about what it is and what it does?
Yes.
Thank you, Cindy.
Please.
We use it for 2 general purposes. One is when complaints are received by the auditor and they're sent over to IA. We use it as a mechanism to assign those service complaints out to the field for supervisors to investigate. Pardon me. Another way we use it is for supervisors to do intake of either a citizen complaint that they might have received, pardon me, in the field, or to enter a use of force, vehicle accident, a number of other types of cases that we as a department want to track. Sorry, so it's 2 general purposes. One, to send assignments out so supervisors can investigate and get back to us, and others to put data entry in. Any other questions about that? Okay.
So when Blue Team came about, it was kind of, at least in my mind, the question was, how much are officers going to use this system to actually kind of, you know, say another officer did something wrong, or you know, basically, you know, call out one of their fellow employees. And I think statistically, we're seeing that officers aren't hesitating to use the Blue Team and contact others about something that they see that happens. For supervisors to then use the tool, the Blue Team tool, to talk to officers and, you know, and do better. So coming the internally generated complaints through the Blue Team, I think we are very fortunate that they got this process going back in 2013, and so we have benefited from that, and we have seen, I think, the types of complaints that we have gotten over the years have changed, and not just, I hesitate to say be less serious, because that's not probably the best way to say it, but it's allowed us to bring things out that we would not have seen but for Blue Team. I think that's an accurate way to say it. Some of them, not all of them. I mean, a lot of them we would see anyway. So I appreciate the intake and classification of this one. I think especially on the heels of last month's, where there was a question that perhaps EPD wasn't looking out for fire personnel safety. And I think in this case, because of the pop, pop, pop sounds that were going on, they were taking that part serious and taking it into consideration about whether fire, you know, should be, you know, rolling in there right away without maybe some look-see. So those are my comments with regards to complaint intake and classification. And now we're at Michael and then Bill.
Yeah, thank you. That was a good history of Blue Team. I agree with everyone else that I feel like the intake and classification worked really well for this. Investigation is coming up, right? Yeah. All right, that's all I got then.
Okay, so I struggle with this one. To me, this was a waste of resources. We spent a lot of time, and Jason did a great investigation on this, spent a lot of time doing this, when I think this could have been answered with a supervisor watching the video, asking a few questions, and not, somehow we got to figure out that performance, or, I mean, I look at and I know the world's a little differently, the police world versus where I work, but, you know, when people aren't doing their job, or we feel like somebody didn't perform their job to the task, we look at it, we talk about it, and we deal with it. When we do these kind of things, I'm looking at more that this should have been a complaint where, you know, excessive force was used, somebody did something to a citizen, they blatantly did something. But for guys that made a decision to go into a house because they thought people were in it, I jokingly told Leah, and it's probably more serious than jokingly, that I wish we would complain about the fire not going in there. If there was two people in a burning bedroom that we knew, and there was one in there, he came out, they brought him out, and he's already dead. So, I mean, could they have saved him? Could they have done something different if the fire wasn't just standing out there doing their hose work and not going in there? Maybe the officers should have told one of the fire captains that there was people in there so they could go in with their masks and breathe the air and not have to breathe the air like the officers did. I mean, this is just disappointing to me that we had to go through this and do this investigation for something that truthfully was handled well, and I think they used their brain and put their lives in danger to hopefully save somebody else up there. And so just this whole was, to me, was a waste of great resources. I'll stop there.
Okay, Leah's got something to say.
I just want to say first, just I appreciate everyone's perspectives. So thank you as ever for being here. And I just I'll talk more about the cases, but I just checked and we have 35 allegations that we've opened this year, which is maybe slightly higher than normal, but it's not atypical. But just as far as cases that will be coming up, there are definitely ones that are sort of more in the traditional vein of, you know, citizen complaints, use of force complaints, things like that. Just we have some workload issues that I'll talk about more later. But no, I appreciate everyone's feedback. I think when this one came in, Mark was still here because it was February, but it was one of those where, you know, I think especially when something comes in from a supervisor and the supervisor expressing so many concerns about their subordinate employees, we're going to look at that pretty seriously. So we did. So that's all I got to say. I won't jump in every time, I promise, unless I really need to.
Okay, so now we're moving on to relevant policies and practices, and we will start with Clay.
So maybe you can help me out here a little bit. In terms of relevant policies and practices, that's what you just said, right? Am I commenting on whether the policies and practices that were brought up as possible issues in this case are relevant, and that's kind of it for this discussion? Or
Anything with, I look at it is anything you want to talk about as part of this investigation that relates to the policies
okay.
or the practices. And we'll get to the end, we will talk about whether there needs to be changes in those, but this would be kind of just talk about what they are.
Yeah, well, so like I said, when I first read just a very brief introduction about this case, I had the same concerns and thought about similar types of practices and policies that might have been violated. And then as I read through and watched, you know, and listened to interviews and watched some of the videos and learn more about it, I gravitated toward more of what Bill was saying. I'm sort of thinking that there obviously, you know, when you just looked at the facts of the case, or when you just sort of heard about the case, there seemed to be that there could be a possibility of putting people at risk, and miscommunication and the specific policies and practices that are cited as possible violations seem to be relevant. And so I don't know if that means that only through the investigation you can really uncover that didn't happen, but and maybe we'll probably talk more about the end result in a little bit. But I do think looking just at the basics of it, the policies and practices that were identified as possible violations made sense to me. Although
And
I don't
have to say also training.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know. So this is similar to last month where there's a communication issue, I think, between police and fire. And I don't think that's a new thing in our world. You know, there's a jurisdictional thing and there's a different type of work thing also. But I do wonder why there wasn't any other communication, broader communication right there at the door before anybody had to put themselves in harm's way. And that to me is the basic issue that both this month and last month we looked at. I don't know that that's a policy violation, but I do think it's a problem. You know, our first responders should be communicating effectively with one another, and there should be, you know, good training for that. So I don't know. I don't think that that's a policy violation, but I do think it's an opportunity for improvement.
Jose.
Okay, I don't know yet if I feel like there's a policy violation or not, and I think that's why I'm here. Hold on. Excuse me. I had some questions, and I think I'll start there. My first question is EPD trained in fire science?
You cut out a little bit. Is EPD trained in fire science?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, Jason, you were about to jump in and I jumped in first. Go.
Yeah, basically we've received very little training. We don't train as much with Eugene Springfield Fire as we ought to. We have received some classes over the years, but I'd say a pretty minimal level.
I guess in that sense, my question is about the grounds that EPD has in assessing what the fire department is doing, whether they're acting too slow or not going in. You know, if we're not trained in fire science, then what grounds do we have to make that kind of assumption? That's my first question. Another one is, I guess I'm being maybe picky. I'm trying to get close to the text, so to speak. On page 13 of the investigative report, at the end, excuse me, at the bottom of the page, Officer C replies to the question, when you said that you made the decision to go in, was there anything that was guiding the decision to take on that risk? So you replied, I want to make sure I'm quoting accurately. Next sentence says, under courage, it says mental and ethical fortitude to act the right regardless of risk to self. Next sentence is the one I have. I was acting 100% to preserve life. I would have done what I did even if I wasn't. And my question is not to question this person's mental processes, but this person is a police officer, and the conduct is different than if they weren't a police officer. And so I just wanted to slow down and pause on that one and note that maybe, as I'm sure has already been being discussed, that maybe this is maybe there are some places that training could address some of this stuff, right? The last question that I had, that I'll take up time for, I have many, was did I believe it's Officer A, know that they would not be encountering any criminal activity before arriving on the scene? What's on display? Because if that was the case, then it would appear to me to be a policy violation, because how would they know what they were going to encounter at the scene of this fire? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Leah.
I was just gonna say, you were cutting out and so I didn't get to hear the whole question, and just, yeah, thank you. I want to hear it.
Maybe I could try this, hold on. Is it better if I speak like this? Okay, sorry, y'all. My last question had to do with the body worn camera. Did Officer A know that did they turn the camera off before they got to the scene on the assumption that they wouldn't be encountering the need to have the body worn camera on? Or was it turned off after they arrived at the scene and assessed it and then said, hey, we don't need to turn this on?
I'm looking at the file because I think there was a little description, and but Jason, if you remember, please jump in. I don't know if Jason remembers, it's been a while now.
I reviewed it earlier. There was 3 independent clips. The cameras were automatically turned on when the lights and siren for the police car got turned on. And I believe that officer his statement during the interview with me was that he didn't think it fit policy, or sorry, they didn't think it fit policy because it was not a criminal type of investigation. They were not intending on interviewing witnesses or suspects. And typically when we go contact or help the fire department, it's mainly just to protect their hoses and run traffic for them. So that wouldn't necessarily be a criminal type of investigation. That's the way I recall it, unless Leah sees something different.
It seems to be that that's kind of a load-bearing assumption. And I would wonder if that can be addressed with some kind of training or policy that body worn cameras do not get turned off until the scene. I mean, maybe it is the case that, let's just say 99% of the time that you go to respond to a fire, that would still leave 1%. And I don't know. I don't know if I'm being pedantic on this, but those are the three questions that I have so far.
So I appreciate you bringing that up, Jose, because I think that to me is the only thing redeeming. I know, Bill, you were saying that it's like, this didn't seem worth looking at, but it's this little needle in the haystack that really kind of is the crux of, I think, of what might be a reason to look at this one, because they're called out to a scene of a fire. Cameras are on while they're going there. Nothing to indicate any criminal activity. Camera turned off by at least one officer. Many of the rest of them kept going. But we would not be able to review this case at the level we're reviewing it had body worn cameras been turned off by all the other officers. And so those body worn cameras, it always goes back both sides, that not only does it not, implicate an officer, but it also sometimes shows that they did the right thing. And so over the years, we've talked about that had a body worn camera not been on, an officer would not have been able to support that they were doing the right thing. And so while I think having them on all the time leads down a path of some other issues of how long do you keep that, who's downloading them, how long you're keeping them, retention, all those sorts of things. Certainly over the years, we have seen that body worn cameras have been pretty good at helping officers show that they were doing the right thing, which I think is what we see here. But then, of course, we also get all of the commentary that is not surprising in the sense of they're just out there, kind of twiddling their thumbs, waiting to go in. And we're the ones that had to go in and, make sure everything was safe for them. Well, it is their job to make sure it's safe. But it's also fire department's job to go into fires. So I think the policies here of the body worn camera, not sure that there's really something to change in it, but I think it's certainly something to be discussed by the police department or the police commission, whether or not there is a benefit that is, outweighs the not to have them on all the time. So I think I think the other thing that was helpful is hearing the background of the officer, that the reason they went in is because they've done this in the past. They've been commended for doing this in the past. So, do you really want to train somebody to not do something that, resulted in a, commendation? So I think that there's a lot of different things that kind of went into this, but I think that it's certainly not the kinds of cases that I think we as a board, really want to be reviewing for the community to see what we're doing, to see that, we're actually kind of delving into, what officers are doing. So, I mean, there is a benefit in looking at anything, right? Anytime we look back and we look at how something was done, we can look at doing it better. Is it outweighed by the amount of time and energy that everybody put into it, to do the investigation, for all of us to review these things? I'll leave that to Bill. He's the finance guy. So Michael and then Bill.
Yeah, so I'm not the finance guy, so I won't talk about that. But I appreciate this discussion. I think that it's really, there's always a benefit. Well, there's often a benefit to reviewing a situation, even if the eventual determination is that nothing was done wrong. I think that if we weren't reviewing too many things, then there'd be a possibility that we weren't reviewing enough, and then we'd be missing possibly things that were important. So I personally don't mind seeing some of these over the course of my time on the board. obviously I wouldn't want to sort of, if we only saw these, I would begin to worry that we were, some of the others were being screened out and that we were missing things. And I hope that, you know, if members of the public ever watch these, that they will also see that there's a wide net that is looking at the conduct of the police department, and much of that is self-observation. And so I really appreciated the fact that this was brought to us by the department and by the auditor's office. If for no other reason than it helps me see, you know, what a situation is where it may be that policies weren't complete. And oh, actually, I was going to ask Leah if we could get a quick review of the difference between unfounded, within policy, and what all the options are.
All the other ones? Sure. Yeah. So there's sustained, which is the conduct happened as alleged and violated policy. There's within policy, which is the conduct may have happened, but it appeared to not violate policy. There's insufficient evidence, which is our standard is more than 50% basically. So it's not a huge standard of proof, but insufficient evidence is there's not enough evidence to prove either way, whether the conduct occurred or not, or whether it was a violation of policy or not. Unfounded is it didn't happen as alleged. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, and so, you know, it seems to me like this is a case where, this might be where Jose was going with his questions. You know, if fire is on scene and they have control of the situation, you know, they're making the determination of, I would think, about whether the house should be entered and at what point and for how long. And so, like, I don't want to do anything that would not commend the officers for trying to save, protect lives that were at risk or in danger. But there does seem to be maybe the need for clearer policies around how agencies will or will not have some kind of shared chain of command in these kinds of situations. But in terms of the policies that were brought to us, I don't see anything.
I guess I'm up.
Bill, and then
Okay, go. Okay. So I guess the policies on the first two, you know, I get that you're choosing judgment, and I think that policy is fine. I do want to talk a little bit about the body worn camera policy. I happened to be on the commission when we first put body cams into action, and we had months and months of discussion about people's private, keeping these things private, and that you're going into people's private homes and talking to people in crisis, and we have to be careful about filming that. And that at the time we weren't ever sure if these would be released to the public, if you could get them through, you know, asking for these through public records. And so, you know, so a lot of these policies were written to sort of help protect that officers could have that ability to turn them off and turn them on when they didn't feel like they really needed to show this person in crisis that somebody could ultimately look at. But I do think it does need to be looked at because, you know, I think that, you know, the purpose of these is that when officers are on a call, especially when they're dispatched to a call, they should have their body worn camera on the whole time until they're cleared from the call. And then looking at this under 1203.7, where it talks about the utilization requirements, it does not say in there that when they've been dispatched to a call or on a call. It just talks about a supervisor. If a supervisor tells them to put it on, everything else is to their judgment. So I think that we might want to send this back with some recommendations to look at this again for those kind of things, because I do think the intent that we always had was that these would be turned on for almost every dispatched call for that. So that's all.
Right. Alan.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate the fact that this morphed into an actual thing that I really didn't, it wasn't so much on my screen, the policy of the video. And to Jose's point, not only was there a fatality, and of course the video could have been useful in investigating a fatality, but also there was criminal activity at that house. It turns out that there was a crime. So in fact, the prediction that I'm not encountering, that apparently did not factor into the analysis at the end, on the policy, but there was a crime, or at least a lot of evidence of criminal activity. The fire department, like the baffling inactivity, I think requires investigation. I'm not a fire expert. They must have a reason, but boy, it's mind blowing to watch that. It's very frustrating. And on the policy thing, my take is, and I don't want, this is going to come out maybe wrong, but the shift, police training for so long, what is about, and everyone has the right to go home and everyone should go home at the end of their shift. And I'm totally in favor of that. But it's so much focus on officer safety and the preservation of officer safety that here the policy cited by the officer, by Officer C, citing the mission statement of EPD, like it blows, it's perfect, it's heroic, it's heroism. And I commend every officer. That's right. Run into the building, go for it. Bless you and thank you for doing that. And the auditor mentioned at the beginning, maybe Officer C didn't get disciplined, you said, because he was told to, he didn't act independently. But my take of my recollection of the facts is that Officer C, they did act independently, and that they're the one that said, let's go in. And that's the recruit, C's the recruit. So I just see from a policy upholding the act heroically and courageously, whatever. I don't want to misquote it, but that's the one. And so for me, the takeaway there, like, yes, and that's a feel good moment and it should be celebrated. And the training issue is that, there is a balance, and it kind of does. It is disappointing. And this is to Bill's point, when discipline results from an act of, an attempt to take my job or to discipline me for acting heroically. So that and the issue that arose with the body cam, I think is very valid. So that's what I got. Thank you.
Okay, did anybody want to make any comments before we move on to adjudications? Leah.
Sorry, just quick. I had two things that I wrote down. One was this issue of the fire and EPD communication. There were definitely two, I think three of these at the beginning of the year where you obviously looked at the one last month, and there was one more where that seemed to be an issue, and I haven't seen any more. So I'm not exactly sure if that was addressed or I know we talked about it a lot, in our internal affairs and command staff and auditor meetings. But I'm glad that I'm not seeing anymore. I'll just say that. The second thing is on the body worn policy. I very much want a video on this. I very much want video all the time. I think you all have heard me say it enough, but as Bernadette was saying, I think it's not that I want it to drill anybody. I want it because it helps me find out the truth of what happened. And so it was frustrating to me because, as Alan said, as it turns out, there was stuff that could have been helpful to have recorded, helpful to have evidence of. But also, I think I started to sort of fly a little bit where I was like, who knows if the fire is arson, you might be investigating that and maybe, but I think the more pertinent and hopefully helpful thing was that we had a lot of discussions around that body worn policy around this case. And we've had a lot of discussions around muting and turning off videos and all of the options that are currently available. And I guess I'll just say that I would be fully in favor of a policy that does not allow you to stop a video when you're still at a call, and that does not allow you to mute, unless the only thing I can understand muting, I guess, in the context of the laws, would be when there's a conversation between employees about discipline or coaching. I think I understand the need to mute that, but honestly, anything else, I feel like we can get edited before release if we need to. If there's tactics or something in there that's sensitive, or a victim statement that shouldn't be released, that can all be taken care of later. I'd rather have a video for purposes of this process, just to be as thorough and close to the truth as possible. And I will get off my soapbox now.
Okay, so now we're on to adjudication. Jose, we'll start with you.
You know, let me navigate up to the actual allegation part, because I want to be specific. Yeah, hold on, buddy. Okay. As far as allegation number 3 for Officer A, I'm inclined to say sustained. And, you know, I think that, okay, let me ask a question to clarify first. Is body worn video subject to public information records requests? It is.
Absolutely. It's a public record. It is considered exempt under certain exemptions, but it is a public record that's for release. Yeah.
Okay. But if there were to be sensitive information, you know, like FERPA information, or mental health crisis, or, you know, super viscerally graphic, even, I don't know. We have people who can, do we have the capability to like censor and redact?
We don't currently have that. I mean, I should say, I don't. Cindy knows more about how, so these records can get released as part of discovery. They can get released as part of a public records request. There are ways to potentially have them available to the public. They will not get released to the public. They are exempt from public release unless certain circumstances are met. Basically, the public interest has to be very high for a disciplinary record to be released to the public, right? There's so much on this. They can fuzz out faces. Like, there are certain things that they can do. And frankly, I don't know if that's just records or how they do that, because I haven't had to investigate it.
So, I think, and I am glad, happy to be persuaded otherwise. It turns on this to me. Did Officer A turn the body worn video off before they had full information about what was going down at this scene? If yes, it's a violation. If no, it's not a violation.
Oh, you're done?
Sorry, over and out.
Okay, sorry. I find that I agree with the recommendations by the chain of command and the auditor's office, and that would put us to Michael, then Bill.
Yeah. So I thought this was much easier for me before the discussion. And that always reminds me why these don't just come to us unless there's already been some sense that they're discussing. So my inclination before the meeting was that I was in support of the recommendations. I think I'm still there, but I do think that clearly there has been enough to have questions about and discussions about, to have occupied us and even had some disagreement possibly among us. I think that both this one and the last case, I think, were like very unique in that I think someone even in the last case even actually said in the file that there's nothing like this could have ever come together if I'd imagined it. This one's a little less like that, but certainly it's not something that's going to come along so often that there's going to be a specific policy for this. I can understand the need for all of the comments have been made about the body worn, but I think that the officers were in good faith. Their understanding thoroughly documented, and it was also my understanding was that unless they're interacting with a member of the public, they don't need to, or actively call to look at a crime scene, that they're not required to have their body worn on. So that makes sense, and yeah, I won't talk about it more.
So I agree with adjudications on all three of the officers, but I will say though, I think that the body worn camera policy does need to be looked at again. I think it should be looked at probably annually anyway, because we learn new things and we need to keep addressing that. I do think Officer C was, or A, can't remember which one, the one that the body worn camera video was for. I think he was within policy, but I don't think he was within the spirit of the policy, which that doesn't count.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jose's point is well taken, and that, but I also understand that the policy in place and you're responding to a house fire, and most of the time you're just making sure hoses don't get run over and your crowd control, and you don't have an expectation. But so that's what's so informative about this, is that we learn, whoa, you could end up finding a dead body and a ton of drugs, so maybe you shouldn't turn it off. And I think that's consistent with what everyone's saying, that the policy, I think the adjudication is correct, but the policy needs to change. Thanks.
I agree. That's basically my opinion as well. Adjudication's correct. Policy could be looked at and reviewed. I also, I'm heartened to hear, Leah, that there hasn't been additional cases related to communication between fire and police, but it would be, just something for us to track going forward, because first responders should be heavily communicating very strategically with each other when they arrive at a scene.
Okay, I think we covered all of the things that we're supposed to cover. If anybody has any final comments, the one comment I did want to make, and I wasn't sure whether I should say it when we did the complaint intake and classification investigation, but I think what I found interesting about the, having everything online is harder for me to always have my notes well organized. I like my paper. But the way this adjudication memo was written, I felt like it wasn't as factually, there were words used in it that I think probably Leah knows exactly the words I was looking at. There were just several moments in there, not in Jason's report. Jason's report, always, as usual, is always great. It's just, reciting what happened, what was discussed, all of the facts. But there were several in the adjudication memo that they just kind of smacked of, I'm not sure if rah-rah is the right way to say it, but just some commentary. It's just some words that seem to be some commentary on what was being reviewed. which I don't think is certainly not necessary. And I don't think it's appropriate in there. And so I would just ask if at some point in time when the auditor is having conversations with chain of command staff that's writing these memos, that I'm not sure the whole board, but personally, I just don't think there are certain things that should be in there. And I think if there's ever a reason why we miss an auditor's report, it's because it's more factually based and historically based. And so that would be my only concern with the report. Does anybody have any other comments before we move on to the auditor's report at this time? Okay, seeing no hands, seeing no shakes of head. Leah, how about the auditor's report?
Thank you. And thank you all for your discussion on that. I appreciate getting the feedback. I appreciate hearing about it. So I am grateful for all the work and the review and the homework that you all do. And I'm grateful for your adaptability to the online format. And I also, just a side note, I think it was very helpful that you all checked in with me about, I was able to look in or whatever. So sorry, we will get to my report now. So I feel like I've been trying to do a really truncated report the last several months. And so now you're going to get the whole thing. I apologize in advance. So first of all, the whole workload staffing issue. I am still working with the ERC to get my folks onboarded. Hopefully, whenever we meet next, I will have those folks to introduce you. I'm very excited for that. In the meantime, Beatrice is back from her maternity leave, which has been wonderful. Vicky is doing astounding amounts of work, and so is Beatrice to keep up with all of our very, sort of, I would say, I don't think it's been a extreme number of complaints this year. We are just, I'm both deputy and auditor, and that's just so we're not flowing as well as we used to. So I'm working on that. Along those lines, we currently have one IA sergeant and far more IA investigations than that one sergeant can do at once, since Jason went off to violent crimes. But so the EPD is working on bringing on a new sergeant to help with IA investigations. I'm sure you'll be hearing from him. So Ryan's going to have someone to help him. I'm hopefully going to have some people to help me very, very soon here. And we'll be able to move some of these through, because like I said, so we've got 35 allegation investigations. We've got some really interesting stuff. Honestly, we have a lot of issues that I haven't seen before, things that are taking a lot of time and a lot of care and a whole lot of investigation. So I know it's been, I think someone told me it was like sort of a dry few months, but we had a lot coming your way. That was the first thing. So one of the things I've been working on when I'm not writing adjudication memos is the ad hoc committee recommendations. So there's sort of two groups who have been working with how the city's response to the ad hoc committee recommendations. And so one of them is this trio of me and the city manager and the municipal court judge, and council appointed us to look at these recommendations and come up with a way to even sort them, so we can have some sort of organization for council to look at, so they know what they could do, what the executive could do, what would require a change in federal law, what would require a change in state law. All of these things are implicated in these recommendations, city charter. So that group, we met several times and then presented a sort of sorting matrix to city council. I believe that was July, I think. Time, not my friend right now. So we presented that matrix to council, and then now the process, the second group that's been working on it is what we're calling the sorting group. And so that's me, the city manager, city attorney, chief, and the employee resource centers, because they have knowledge of the collective bargaining issues. So we are meeting and going through all of those recommendations and trying to sort out, we're not looking at whether or not they should happen. That's going to be mostly council's decision, or if it's a executive decision, it's an executive decision, but mostly looking at what all would need to change if any, of for each recommendation. So some of these are huge and would require changes on a whole lot of levels. Some of them would require a directive from the chief, you know, so I think we're going through all of that just to figure out, just to have that information compiled so council can make an informed decision about how to move forward on those recommendations. So that's taking a lot of time, but it's really interesting work. And not to talk about my feelings too much, Bill, but no, it's been really fun to look at all this more big picture work. I've been deputy for a very long time now, and it's fun to sort of stretch my imagination and see what we can do looking forward. So one of those things I mentioned, I believe last month, but I'm working on getting a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer position listed for our office. That would be someone who's housed in our office and then looks at EPD practices, policies, training, discipline, all of those things through an equity lens to see, and then offers input and collaboration on improving all of those things. Our ordinance and charter allow us to report on trends at EPD, so that's one way we're going to do that. I've met with the ERC and we're gathering. We're kind of on the cutting edge a little bit. Not a lot of, at least not a lot of oversight organizations have this, but I think some cities and some municipalities are starting to go this direction. So I've got some good groundwork and I'm going to pick apart those and try to come up with our own special unique job description and get that posted hopefully before the holidays is the plan, because we'd like to have that position on by May. Another thing we've been working on is developing a community portal for our complaint system. I met with our information services division to try to set up a way to have people, my vision was kind of like what the building department does, right? If you have a permit, you can go check on your permit, you can schedule appointments and inspections and all that stuff. And it seems like we ought to be able to do that for people who file complaints, that they can file a complaint, check on the status, see who it's assigned to, you know, attach videos, pictures of whatever happened. Yeah. And so I met with ISD a couple times and they were working on it. And then Cindy went to a conference where they are developing this exact thing. So we are working with that vendor to try to set up some times. And I know ISD found a couple of other vendors. So that's one of the long-term projects we're working on to get that set up and get a little more accessibility for the complaint process in our office. So it's not just letters that go off and we never see them again. Oh, so much, you guys. I've been meeting with the chiefs and working to improve, working with command staff sort of overall and Cindy and the chiefs, but sort of three big areas where I'm looking to move forward or get momentum back, depending, but one is on deadly force investigations. I think I've talked to you all about this before, but you all have heard a lot from our office about what we do not like about the IDFIT investigations. And the fact is that there's an administrative investigation that follows IDFIT. And I think all of the stakeholders in our work understand that that needs to be a better product. So I've been working with command staff to try to look at the policy around deadly force investigations, the practices around deadly force investigations, and how do we get to a product that is a full narrative of the whole story of what happened rather than just this looking at the potential criminality or not of what happened, because that is a very limited picture and not what people need or want or deserve. So we've been working on that, trying to get some traction going on that. It's hard to focus on all these big picture stuff when we still have all these complaints coming in. So I'm looking forward to getting my help. Another issue we had, oh, Bill, you got a question, go ahead.
Well, more of just, I'm really happy to hear that the IDFIT is on one of your priority lists, because I have not liked that process for a long time. I think it's broken. And when we looked at that last one to see the investigative work that was done on behalf of that was very disappointing. So good work there.
Thank you. Yeah, it's I'm excited to get a better set of practices in place, frankly. We also, before the pandemic hit, we had some momentum around an early intervention system. I'm glad Cindy's here in case you all have questions on this, but basically we have, like we were talking about Blue Team earlier, there's another system called IA Pro. It's all these database programs, but basically we have the capability to track a lot of things about officers, whether they're getting complaints, how active they are, if they're getting sustained complaints or just, not sustained complaints, all of those things. And so Mark, when he was still here, was working on trying to get this early intervention system going where we can have a system that's looking for all these different data points and sorting out who may need a little more support, may need time off, who could help, who would benefit from more training or more attention. So we don't get to the point where we have a serious allegation of misconduct, where we're getting to it before that happens. So we had some momentum around that, and then pandemic and riots and community impact case and everything blew up. So Cindy has been working on trying to get us our momentum back on that. We're going to meet in a few weeks and see if we can try to get that going again. I've mentioned it in the annual report for 2 years now, so I'm really hoping we can get it going. And then the other thing, I've mentioned this a few times, and it's kind of in a nebulous planning stage, but this complaint, I feel like is a good time to talk about it because I've been trying to think of a way to have some kind of, I don't know, like a middle ground investigation where employees' rights are still protected. They have notification of what I'm looking at, but maybe it's not an entire full-blown IA process. I think the way we do it is very helpful in a lot of ways. There's a structure, there's a process, there's timelines. Everybody knows exactly what to expect, and all of that is very good. And sometimes I just want to ask a couple of questions and write a memo and put it to bed. That's definitely going to be something that would take a lot of work and a lot of collaboration, a lot of bargaining. But I think everybody can see the benefits around that. So I would love for feedback on that. If you're noticing things or you want to talk to me about those issues or concerned about potentially going that route, I'd love to hear about it. Because that's definitely in like the very nascent stages. We are working on new outreach materials. Well, Beatrice is working on new outreach materials because she's awesome. But we largely with the ad hoc process, we identified it appears that there is a need for more digestible content about our office and what we do and what you all have access to and what you do. So Beatrice is working on our outreach materials so they're a little more accessible, a little more digestible, see if we can do some videos or things that are easier for people to understand what on earth we are and what on earth we do. We'll talk more about that at another meeting. Along those lines with the education, I did present at the Sergeant's Academy for EPD a couple weeks ago, but just it's an opportunity. They have a lot of new officers coming in, a lot of new officers becoming sergeants, so it's an opportunity for them to sort of get to know me and get to know what I do. That feedback, Bernadette, about adjudication memos, that's a good place for me to give that, so I can, because you and I feel the same way about that. So I've been working on that. I will be at a new officers academy in December, I believe. So I get to talk to them about expectations and our IA process and what they can expect from our community and from our office with regards to citizen complaints. 2 more things. The Law Enforcement Contacts Committee is starting to meet up again. I checked in with them to update their contact from Mark to me. So I will be meeting with them, with that group in December on, that's the statewide program around racial profiling, profiling complaints and how agencies are dealing with them. We talked a little bit about it last month, but they're hoping to get that more traction, more momentum. I think everybody's trying to come back from the last couple of years. And then along those lines, I volunteered. I don't know that this will work out, but I mentioned that I've been going to the NACOL, the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement conference online, and they were doing a call out for committee members. So I'm looking to sort of expand our networking with that group. We've we've not connected with them a lot in recent years, and they've grown a lot in recent years with all the George Floyd and a lot of communities coming together to really want community oversight of law enforcement. Obviously, this organization is growing, and I think we have a really good model that we can help other communities implement and help them, well, hopefully help them implement and help them with any questions they might have about how this goes. Because honestly, at a 14-year-old civilian oversight office is pretty old in this business. So I think we're doing okay. I think I just got through my list as fast as I could. I'm sorry for talking fast. It's what I do. It's also late. Do you all have any questions?
So the NAPOL conference at one point did we send members of the CRB to that, or was that like just some kind of weird memory?
That was before my time, but it did happen. Yes. I would say, so this year it has been mostly virtual. There is an in-person component of it in Tucson in December. I am happy to send you all links to that information. I believe I'm supposed to have access to the recordings of those seminars through the end of the year. And I believe I would be able to give you guys that access as parts of my organization. So I can send you guys some of that information. I am not going in person this year, but my kids are getting their shots this week. So the world is gonna open up, you guys. But I will try to get more information to you also. If you're interested for next year, we can make sure to get that to you.
Yeah, because I mean, I remember there was some really good stuff that came out of it. So I appreciate that you guys are kind of looping back into it. Any other questions from anybody?
Yeah, I would just say that I think it's really cool that you're working with this company to get the tracking stuff. I was just talking the other day about how hard it is not to have that for folks. And I know Chicago has a decent system where if someone has the case file, I think they call it a log number, for their complaint, they can go and access the materials after it's completed. I don't think that they're able to check the status when it's in process. But I don't know of anyone else that sort of makes that easy to do. And so it's just great that that's happening. And I will be at the NACOL conference in Tucson. At least that's the plan. I have been canceling travel plans left and right over the last couple of years, making them and then canceling them. So we'll see how it happens. I got a refundable ticket.
I hope it works out. Report back. Anyone? Questions, concerns? No?
All right.
Mind. Okay, thanks.
As we go into closing comments, Jose not being a morning person or not being an evening person, maybe he was suggesting we're supposed to have morning meetings instead. Nope, apparently not based on that look. So
5 a.m. It's my preferred time to meet with people.
Yeah, no, that ain't working for me. But we can always talk about that. We can put that on a future agenda if we want to change up the time or day of when we meet. So I guess I'll just go ahead and start off. I hope that we at some point in time can go back to casebooks. The information dump, I'm just going to call it that. I was able to get into it right at the beginning. And then when I tried to go back to it, I couldn't get into it. And then Leah sent the thing out and then I was able to get back into it again. So I'm not sure kind of where the glitch was in that it's like, if there's just like a one-time access or what it was. But it certainly, once you get in there, it makes it easier for all the videos to be there in one place, the audio recordings. It's just the paper, it's harder for me. Nobody has a home printer like you have printer in your office to put all those things out. And so as I said before, I think taking off December makes sense given looking at the closed case files. I don't see anything on there that jumps out at me in talking with Carolyn. She didn't have time to review the case and make any comments, but I did check in with her about what her thoughts might be on also canceling December. She agreed that there wasn't anything that she saw that stood out to have a conversation. Although we were able to have a good conversation about this one today, that's means we can always find something to talk about, unless somebody here has seen one of the closed cases that wants to bring it up. I'm gonna stand by my suggestion that we skip a month. So after me is Michael, then Bill, and then we'll get to you, Alan. Closing comments.
I don't have any closing comments. Excuse me. I guess I would like to wait on as long as it makes sense to call off the December meeting, just in case something comes up. I'd be ashamed to get behind, but obviously it's also nice to know sooner rather than later.
I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. Great auditor's report, Leah. It was not too long. I appreciate all the information. I know you've been busy, but I appreciate all that. And thanks everybody else, Cindy, Beatrice, Jason, and Vicky for all your work. And with my ending, I will move that we cancel the December meeting for lack of closed cases. And I will stop with that.
Well, there's a motion on the table, so I don't know, Bernadette, if you want to officially handle that, or let me or finish the round and leave it floating for a moment. Do you have a preference?
Well, since I haven't heard a second, we'll let that just float there for a while and see if anybody seconds it.
Okay, my question is, when I look at that list, I'm still getting I'll stop saying that over and over, but when I look at the list, I'm seeing a list of open cases, right? And so those are not on the table for discussion, because there's definitely meaty things in the list that I saw, and I'm like, whoa, we should, so if it's just the closed, I now will focus, Bernadette, I really didn't understand the selection process, and to Michael's point earlier, someone viewing this from an outside lens and the case selection of the last couple of times, might just, even though it's clearly, I accept the sentiment of all of you that it's not the case, that we will be involved with cases that involve citizens. I suffered from slightly thinking, gee, what is happening here? So if it happened to a member of the commission, it could certainly happen to the public. So I think that your point that you made was a good one, and that's it. And I'll second the motion. So there you go.
Okay, so there is a motion to cancel December. There is a second. So we will continue to float and discuss this as we make our comments, which are on to Clay and then Jose.
Yeah, I think I only looked at a few of the closed cases. I was, like Alan, sort of learning how that works a little bit. And so I'll pay more attention to those as we go forward too. I really appreciate the depth of these investigations. Like I said, when I first looked at the overview of this case today that we looked at, I had the same concerns. And then it's just through, come through all the details that are provided to us that you really have a full understanding of what's going on. And so I think it's rewarding to go through that and to see how much care is taken on in all of these processes. So I appreciate that. I think, yeah, that's it. So I'll see you either next month or in 3 months, I guess, after we vote.
Thank you. I have a closing comment that could be just way out in left field. And if you want me to just talk to you about Leah, Leah, I'd be more than happy to. One of the things that I've been thinking about, I know we're not in a courtroom here, but if you can let me, make an analog from something from the courtroom, when we're adjudicating, are we kind of using a reasonable person standard when we're thinking about conduct? And I wonder about how useful and valuable and who that kind of serves. Yeah, that's my closing comment. And if it's something that, you know, if it's like this is a way niche-y thing, let's just talk about this on an email chain, happy to do that too.
Okay, so we've gone through everything. We have a motion on the table that we not have a meeting in December. We already know that we're not meeting in January. Leah has already told us that there are some things coming up that will be of interest for us to discuss. Is there any other discussion on the motion that we have at this point? Oh, Leah, do you want to let us know anything before we vote on this?
I guess Jose, I'm going to get back to you, but because that's an interesting point. But okay, but B, and more pertinent is, I just want to say that especially for our newer folks, when there's a sustained allegation, then there is a disciplinary process that we are not a part of. We tend to try to not review cases when they are still in the disciplinary process. So just so those end up taking more time, because they can, you know, they can be grieved, and there's a lot of stuff that goes into that process, even though I'm not working on it. So just yeah, that's all I'm going to say. Stop.
I had a question. Just, did we hear a position from the auditor as to whether we should be on the issue of the motion, if that's appropriate to ask?
You did not hear a position from me. I will do whatever my board would like to do.
A follow-up, if I may, and just then, are we going to fall behind? I heard Michael say, you know, he does that. I think that's a valid thing, and I don't have enough information, I feel, to make a decision.
I would say that given that currently we have one person serving as deputy auditor and interim auditor and one person as IA investigator, it seems unlikely that we're going to have a wave of things close all at once. However, being that we are bringing on new folks in both of those offices, it is possible that by February we could have several closed interesting cases. This is true. What we could do, I mean, as sort of if you guys vote to not have a meeting in February, or sorry, in just kidding, in December, I can check in with leadership and with the group if there's anything that's closing during December that might be interesting for a January meeting. We tend to not do those because it's hard to get the books together in December, but with enough advanced notice, we may be able to do that. So sort of as a middle ground, we could cancel December and then have January remain as a possibility if that's what the group wants. But again, we are staff, we will do whatever you want to do.
So I'll note that if we meet in January, the second meeting, since we always meet on the second Tuesday would be January 11th. So I think certainly we would have to make a decision by December 28th. That would be 2 weeks before.
I'm saying I would probably check in with you and Carolyn like by the second Tuesday of December and say, hey, I've got something or I don't.
Okay. So I think that's good information. I think, yes, while historically we've taken January off because December is a tough time to get things ready for us to review. I think having that as a backup is a great option. Is there anybody that is not of the opinion that is a good option to leave on open, or any comments about it? Not that we're folding it into the motion, but I think I just want to make sure that that's kind of something that people understand, that the leadership will discuss if we vote to say we're not going to meet in December, that we will continue to discuss with Leah about January. Jose.
I'm wondering, do you think it would be useful to say vote on December, and just, is it easier to plan on meeting in January and calling it off like a few days before or a week before? Or is it easier for Leah and all of us to be like, okay, well, let's hold that open and then see in December? Because personally, I think it would be easier for me. I'd be happy to cancel in January if you don't have anything. to just leave it open? Or like assume that we would meet and then cancel if we don't have.
I think I would say that planning for meetings starts about, well, it should start, Vicky's gonna correct me on this. It should start at least 3 weeks before the meeting, right? So because we need to pick a case, we need to get the materials together, and we like to have them to you with 2 weekends. So I have a proposal. If you decide not to have a December meeting, we could still distribute closed cases to the group by that second Tuesday in December. If anyone has strong feelings, you could get those to me or to Carolyn and Bernadette, and then we would know that day, you know, or within a few days, whether we need to meet in January. Does that help?
I think, seeing the nods, I think that's a good idea, that if this motion passes, you'll still send out some kind of information to us the first week of December, second week of December. And if there's something in a closed case file that becomes closed that you think would be, or you'll just send us the closed case file. How does that sound? I don't think we need to make it as a friendly amendment. I think it's just what we're saying. So the motion is we cancel December with all of these little comments and conversations that we've had. All those in favor, raise a thumb. And something. All right, anyone opposed? Doesn't look like it. All right, so that settles that motion. And as always, feel free to email Leah if you have any questions or concerns. She will be forwarding things out to us as she thinks we need to hear about them, as she always does. I'm sorry that we didn't get a chance to talk about the article that you sent just a couple of days ago. It was very helpful. Thank you for sending it to us. And I will be happy to turn the reins back over to Carolyn when we meet next. I'm sure you all will as well, because she's better about remembering to go rotate, rotate, rotate. All right. Thanks everybody for your time and attention tonight. Have a great November and December, and we will see you sometime in the new year.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.